Hi, I'm attorney Gregory Dell, and attorney Stephen Jessup and I are going to talk about an interesting merger of companies that just took place, and that's between the Great West Life Assurance Company and the Canada Life Assurance Company. Now, this news just came about in January of 2020, where it seems to be it's more of a branding opportunity where many of these companies may have been under the same umbrella. That corporate structure doesn't really affect you as a claimant if you had a policy with Great West, but we do know that moving forward it's going to be referred to as the Canada Life Assurance Company, and that's a consolidation between these two companies. Now, we've had a lot of experience with Great West, and their policy's been fairly heavily litigated, I would say, as well as we've done a ton of appeals. Primarily, we've seen those claims through the American Dental Association as their group policy, and we've also seen it through some government entities that Great West has insured the employees of the government entities. Those policies are ERISA exempt. What's the benefit of these policies being ERISA exempt for people who have these policies?
Well, the number one benefit is then you're not subject to ERISA, the federal statute. You are allowed to bring lawsuits in state court. Jury trials, you're allowed to depose their people, have your day in court. So it's legitimate litigation, like if you had bought an individual policy through an agent. So that's going to give you a lot more legal teeth in the event that they do deny your case.
Yeah, the fact that it's ERISA exempt is a tremendous benefit for a claimant, and that exemption can come if you bought this policy through a group such as the American Dental Association, or if you're a government employee, you're exempt from ERISA. I always found that so interesting that when they created this ERISA law, which was supposed to protect all these employees, they exempted government employees. So here's such a good law. This law is so fair that we're not going to let it apply to government employees, which is...
It doesn't apply to the people who drafted it.
Which is anything but the truth about it being a fair law, because it's completely unfair to claimants. But nonetheless, you probably have a policy that's not governed by ERISA. But Steve, let's dive in. With this Great West policy that we have, what is the single biggest challenge that you see in the Great West policy?
Well, I'd say the biggest one, since most people that do have this are dentists under the ADA, I know they try to sell it to you while you're in dental school, is that the policy requires objective evidence to the satisfaction of Great West in order to pay benefits. I know you've litigated, I've litigated for dentists where there was questions on, for instance, carpal tunnel syndrome, and EMG and nerve conduction studies weren't accurate, but our client's own surgeon, who's performed thousands of these, says, I opened them up, I can clearly see that the issue's there. But Great West said, no, it has to be to our satisfaction, and they denied the claim, and lawsuits were filed. So this policy is meant to protect dentists, but a lot of the most common condition that dentists will get, whether it be wrist issues, neck issues that are going to cause some type of radiating pain, they try their best to limit any type of payment under that. So you really aren't getting the best bargain when looking at this policy, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's a reason when you buy it as a member of an association that if you were shopping around policies and you said to an agent, hey, I have this opportunity to have this Great West, but can you show me what an other policy is, that the other policies that you saw from these other individual companies, which are called individual disability policies, were probably 5 to 6 or 8 times the price of what you were getting in the group policy. And the reason for that is the policy language. Now, you talked about that Great West has this requirement that says as to our satisfaction. But here's objective evidence of a positive carpal tunnel, through an EMG test, but not significant enough for us. So how can they say that, and what are the options available to a claimant if they disagree with that?
Well, if they do disagree, Great West, even though you don't have to file an appeal, does have appeal processes to go through that. It is tough. To their satisfaction leaves it pretty open in the air as to what that means. I mean, arguably in litigation, since we aren't in federal court under ERISA, you can argue that's ambiguous under the policy. It's a breach of contract action. Go those routes. Personally, I've seen this enough that in my personal opinion, it's almost like they write this language in there knowing that if it gets into litigation, they're going to look to try to resolve it, settle the case. because it's very broad. Honestly, it's really unfair, and it's surprising that when these policies get approved for, to be able to written, that they haven't been, hey, you got to take this language out, this makes no sense. But they persist.
The other issue that we've seen come up in a Great West is when you have, let's say, for example, a dentist, and the dentist has a couple other dentists working in his practice for him, but the dentist says, I can't do the duties of treating patients, but I can still have my practice running. And the way in which Great West would look at that to say, well, we see that you may be limited in doing your procedures, but your practice is still running, you're still generating income, and part of your duties was to manage your practice, and therefore we don't think you're totally disabled, we think you're partially disabled. But if you're partially disabled and your practice is still making money, then you may not qualify for the partial disability. Not to say I agree that you're partially or residually disabled, but that's their argument. You should be able to be totally disabled if you can't do the duties of your occupation, yet your business is still making money. What about some of the other limitations in the policy, such as a mental nervous type limitation?
They do maintain 24 months for mental health conditions, meaning they only pay you that 24-month period if that's the result, causing situation for the disability. That's common across most policies, so that's pretty standard in the industry.
Okay. Just to briefly touch on the other service that we've helped a lot of claimants with Great West is when it comes to applying for coverage as well, that we're able to speak to you maybe months, weeks before you're even considering filing a claim. We'll provide you with a free complimentary review of your policy. We'll talk about a potential plan for you to be able to get your benefits approved. We offer a service where we help with the entire application process to work with you, your doctors, your employer, if you're not self-employed, to prepare all of the information necessary for filing an application. Now, I would encourage you to watch some of our other videos where we talk about what's required in the application process. I know you and I have done a few videos on that, and it's very extensive because, and Steve, I want you to address how detailed is Great West in the review of a claim for someone who's looking to get paid benefits?
They're going to be very, and if you're a dentist considering it, they're going to be very, very detailed. If you own your own practice, they're going to want to see profit and loss statements, your ADA codes, so everything that you're billing there, taxes. They're going to go through and look at everything to see if you have some other, basis or rationale for wanting to file for disability. Was the practice suffering, things like that. So they're going to go through all your financials, especially because they're going to look to see if there's a way to get out from having to pay, if there's secondary gain arguments to be had. So you want to make sure all of that is in order before submitting and filing. And also dentists, and especially since most people that have these policies are dentists, sometimes don't make the best patients, meaning they don't get into the doctors as much as they should, or they don't have it documented properly, the problems they're having. So it's also making sure that your medical records are accurately reflecting how the issues that you're experiencing are, impacting the ability to do the job, and even that you're getting into the doctor enough and going through courses of treatment and trying to address it. Because if you don't, Great West will rip it apart, say the medical doesn't support the case. So you have a lot that you need to think about, and that's why you said sometimes if you're thinking about it months in advance, it can be great to get an attorney involved so you can set a roadmap of what needs to be done leading up to the filing of a claim. Because it can be hard if you run your own practice. You just can't close the doors overnight. So it does take a lot of consideration there.
Right. Overall, Great West had its roots as a Canadian company. The fact that now they're changing the branding name to Canada Life Assurance makes me think, as you and I were discussing, that they're not really serious about trying to work up further business in the American market. So we'll see how many of these policies continue to be out there. But a name is just a name. But if you're branding with the name Canada Life, it's maybe going to be a difficult sell to get a lot of Americans to buy a disability policy from a Canadian company. I know Sun Life is one of those companies who tries to do it, a Canadian-based company who tries to do it in the US as well. So we'll see how that's going to shake up, but I don't anticipate a change in their internal people or the lawyers that they use in our working relationship with whether it's Great West or Canada Life is going to change. So no matter what stage you're at with your Great West or Canada Life Assurance long-term disability claim, feel free to give Stephen or myself a call. We represent clients all over the United States. We're always available to provide you with a free initial consultation and review of your claim. We never charge any fees or costs unless we make a recovery for you, so there's lots of things for us to discuss with you. We look forward to the opportunity to speak with you.